Throughout the vast forests and remote areas of America, countless individuals have had chilling encounters with what many believe to be Bigfoot. From terrifying late-night visits to eerie sightings in broad daylight, these dramatized stories take you into the heart of the unknown. Join us as we explore some of the most haunting and mysterious Bigfoot encounters ever reported, where each experience leaves more questions than answers. Sighting submitted by witness on Tuesday, October 25, 2005. Daytime sighting by 6 seismic workers in the Uinta Mountains. In January 1984, when I was 19, I started working for a seismic company in Wyoming. After the holidays, I relocated to Evanston with my cousin. We worked on a 6-man crew picking up seismic jugs in the Uinta Mountains. Every day, a van or helicopter would take us out to the site, and we'd work for hours before being picked up and returned to Evanston. On January 15th, our boss offered double pay if we volunteered to go into the mountains before a big storm hit and retrieve some jugs we'd laid down 2 days earlier. My cousin and I, along with 4 other guys, agreed. They flew us out to the site at around 7:30 a.m., and we began working quickly despite the cold and the cloudy sky. By about noon, the snow was coming down lightly as we reached the top of a hill overlooking some thick black timber. We stopped for lunch, started a small fire, and took a break. As we were eating, one of the guys pointed down the hill and said, "Look, there's a bear." We all turned to look and saw something dark moving through the trees. At first we thought it was a black bear, but as it emerged from the timber we realized it was something else. It was walking upright on 2 legs covered in black hair except for its face, which seemed lighter in color. Its arms were long and it moved with big, swinging strides, making low noises like someone talking to themselves. I shouted, "That's not a bear! What the hell is that?" The creature stopped, turned to look at us, and seemed surprised to see us there. It then bolted back into the trees, breaking branches as it went. Just as we were processing what had happened, we heard a chilling scream, a combination of a woman and a cougar, echoing from the forest below. It made all of us freeze in terror. Our foreman decided we needed to leave immediately. We quickly gathered our gear and started climbing to a higher hill where the helicopter could pick us up. As we were making our way up, the scream echoed again, only closer this time. It was a sound I'll never forget. We waited 20 minutes for the helicopter to arrive and take us back to Evanston. No one said a word on the ride back. But later that night, we shared beers and agreed to keep what we saw between us. Hikers see 3 upright animals near their vehicle, submitted by witness on Tuesday, January 2, 2001. In August 1986, my friend who was from Kemmerer, Wyoming, and I went hiking in Lincoln County. It was a beautiful sunny day, around 55 degrees. We spent most of the day quietly walking to see wildlife. We saw elk and moose and were making a big loop back to the truck by evening. As it got darker, we knew we wouldn't reach the truck before nightfall. By 7:30 p.m., it was almost completely dark, and as we crossed a small stream, we saw the truck in the moonlight about 500 yards away. As we got closer, around 400 yards, we noticed movement near the truck. At first, we thought someone might be trying to break into it, but we weren't sure what it was. We decided to sneak up quietly. Both of us were armed, but we weren't scared, just cautious. As we got closer, about 75 to 100 yards away, I saw that the figure wasn't human. There were 3 of them, 2 large ones, about 6.5 feet tall, and a smaller one, about 5 feet. They were upright, covered in dark brown hair, and had long arms and broad shoulders. They were standing near the truck, curious, but not aggressive. We froze in place, not knowing what to do. After a few seconds, the creatures noticed us and bolted into the trees. We ran toward the truck, and though they ran away from us, I got a clear look at one of the smaller ones as it ran. It had long, swaying hair and moved with an upright gait, like a football player running with its body leaning back. I quickly unlocked the truck and we sped out of there. My friend told me, "We can't tell anyone about this," and honestly, I didn't. It was such a bizarre experience, I didn't know if anyone would believe me. But what we saw was real, and I've never forgotten it. Bear hunter has sighting while approaching bait site, submitted by witness BP on Wednesday, September 24, 2003. On April 20, 2003, a friend and I were hiking to a bear bait site about 2 miles west of Highway 89 on the Idaho-Wyoming border. I had set up the bait barrel a week earlier and noticed bear tracks in the snow, so we returned to check on it. As we were walking, we found a fresh muskrat carcass lying on the trail with no signs of a predator nearby. It was odd, but we continued to the bait site. After placing more bait in the barrel, we heard cracking branches above us. Looking up, we saw something bipedal standing on a ledge about 400 yards away. At first I thought it was a moose, but then I realized it had only 2 legs. It was about 7 to 8 feet tall, with long dark brown legs and a broad muscular build. I asked my friend, "What is that?" He replied, "Must be a moose." But I pointed out, "It only has 2 feet." He didn't respond and started walking back toward the trail. I kept watching as the creature quickly disappeared into the trees. As we hiked back, I felt a strange sense of being watched, almost as if we were being followed. My friend didn't say much, but later, when I told the story to others, he brought up the muskrat carcass, saying it had bothered him as much as the sighting. I still don't know what we saw that day, but it didn't behave like any animal I've ever encountered. Party of 5 campers observed 7-foot creature outside their RV, submitted by witness on Tuesday, June 3, 2003. In June 2000, my family and I were camping in Grand Teton National Park. It was a peaceful night until our dog started barking violently, waking everyone up. Looking out the window of our RV, we saw a large, hairy creature standing about 10 feet away. It was massive, standing upright like a human but covered in hair. The creature glanced at the RV for a moment before jogging off into the darkness. We were all too shocked to speak until the next morning. When we went outside, we found huge footprints in the damp ground near the RV. The creature's size and presence left us stunned. We didn't get a clear look at its face, but the encounter was enough to spook us all. The next day we packed up and left, still wondering what we had witnessed. In June of 2004, 2 friends and I went camping in the San Juan National Forest, just east of Lake Vallecito in Colorado. My friend JG, who was familiar with the area, led us 12 miles up a remote forest road. We set up camp at a dead-end spot, and JG mentioned it was his first time camping there alone without other groups nearby. The day was uneventful, with some hiking and cooking over the fire. The only odd thing we noticed was the partial skeleton of a horse, far from any ranch. Around midnight, as we were winding down, we heard a strange, 2-tone howl coming from a hill about a quarter mile to the north. It wasn't a coyote. The sound had a deep bass, like someone imitating a coyote, but with a much richer tone. A few minutes later, the same howl echoed again, followed by a loud crack that sounded like something hitting a tree. We were all on edge, standing around the fire, trying to figure out what was happening. JG grabbed his shotgun and we all felt uneasy. Quite a feat for 3 people with police and military backgrounds. 5 minutes later, we heard another howl, this time much closer, about 100 yards to our west. Then it howled again, moving even closer. Whatever it was big and loud. DC and I drew our pistols, and we focused on the road that led to our camp. The moon was bright, so we had decent visibility in the open areas, but the howls kept getting closer. Then another series of howls came from the hill to the south, about a quarter mile away. It was like they were communicating. Something was closing in on us, and it wasn't just one of them. We decided to leave, fast. We packed up as quickly as possible, with one person standing guard with a flashlight and gun, while the others loaded the trucks. We didn't see or hear anything as we left, but the tension was palpable. As we reached the main road, we stopped to unload our guns and stow them legally. That's when we heard another set of howls, this time about a mile back down the road we had just driven. Whatever it was had followed us, and we wasted no time getting out of there. Later we reflected on the experience, and after much discussion, we concluded that we might have had a Bigfoot encounter. The remote wooded mountain location, the eerie 2-tone howls, and the fact that something large and intelligent was communicating and closing in on us, it all pointed to something unusual. No one would risk getting shot pulling a prank on armed campers in the middle of nowhere. The only thing missing was the infamous Bigfoot stench, but with no wind, it might have been too far away for us to notice. We aren't out to convince anyone, but we felt we had to share what happened. We're all experienced outdoorsmen, and none of us had ever been that shaken before. Whatever it was real, and it wasn't something we want to encounter again. Various sightings by campers and ranchers along Lake Fork, a tributary of the Conejos River. In the first week of June 1994, my 2 sons and I were fishing at a beaver pond on the Lake Fork of the Conejos River, about a mile upstream from where it meets the main river. It was near sunset, and the sun had already dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the area. We were enjoying the quiet evening when, suddenly, a terrifying gravelly scream echoed from the forest about 150 to 200 yards away, just beyond a rise covered in sparse trees. The sound was incredibly loud, unlike anything I had ever heard before, even after 20 years of bow hunting experience. It wasn't the sound of an elk or a bear. This was far more powerful, almost as if the creature had a megaphone for a mouth. The scream lasted only a second or two, but was repeated 3 times, with a 10 to 15 second pause between each one. The noise had an unmistakably threatening quality to it. A light breeze was blowing from us toward the source of the sound, and I figured whatever made that noise could probably smell us. Unarmed and with my sons by my side, I decided it was best to leave. While I was curious, my instinct to protect my children outweighed the desire to investigate. The next morning, I returned alone to the area at sunrise, hoping to find some evidence of what had made the sound. I discovered a series of large, old tracks, about 16 inches by 8 inches in size, in a flat area uphill. Though they were too weathered to make out any distinct details like toes, the tracks formed a single line across the bare ground. They were likely a couple of weeks old, and while they could have been distorted bear tracks, their size and shape were unusual. This wasn't the only strange event in the area. Back in 1990, my parents had an encounter near one of the cabins at Lake Fork Ranch. As they drove up, they saw a large, black, furry figure standing near the porch of a cabin. At first, they thought it was a bear, but they soon realized it was on the ground, not the porch, and standing about 8 feet tall. The creature quickly ran downhill, crossed a stream, and disappeared into the forest. My father found a single track by the stream, about 17 to 18 inches long, with distinct human-like toes. In 1991, my cousin had a frightening experience when something violently rocked his RV during the night, nearly tipping it over. He stayed up the rest of the night with a pistol in hand. The next morning, he discovered a box of apples was missing, box and all. A few years later, in 1995, some campers in the area reported a similar incident where their RV was rocked in the night. A daylight sighting by hikers in the Loveland Pass area. I'm sharing these experiences in the hope that other Colorado sightings will come to light. There have been other reports, and I know this region has had its share of strange encounters. In late August of 2000, my friend Mike French and I, along with my dog, decided to hike in the Loveland Pass area of Colorado. We parked off Colorado Highway 6, where it crosses the Continental Divide, and hiked south along the ridge for about 5 miles. Our goal was to explore some of the valleys on the eastern side, looking for pioneer artifacts. As we descended below the tree line, we entered a boggy meadow that sloped down to a large stream to the east. The opposite bank was thick with brush and trees, providing a dense cover. As we explored, we started hearing noises that sounded like a large animal moving through the brush across the stream. Curious, we tried to get closer, but each time we moved, the sounds seemed to retreat further downstream. At one point, I caught glimpses of a large, hairy animal with brown and black fur. At first, I thought we were tracking a bear, and my friend seemed to think the same. But then, the animal came a bit closer and paused, watching us for a few seconds. It was tall, taller than any bear we had ever seen, and standing upright on 2 legs. When it turned and moved away, it did so with a long, loping gait, unlike anything a bear could manage. What struck me the most was how calm my dog was during the entire encounter. Normally, he gets excited and aggressive when encountering wildlife. He even chased an adult black bear out of a campground once. But this time he remained quiet, showing only mild interest, almost as if he thought the creature was another person in the woods. That detail, along with the animal's unusual behavior and movement, convinced me that what we saw wasn't a bear or any known wild animal. We didn't follow it, preferring to keep our distance, and eventually, we made our way back without further incident. The experience still stands out as one of the most mysterious encounters I've had in the wilderness. Teens fire at big black figure peeking in window of home, submitted on Wednesday, January 3, 2001. In May of 1977, north of Montrose, Colorado, on what was then called the Old Airport Road, now 6450 Road, an unforgettable encounter shook 2 teenage boys. Jeff, who was in junior high at the time, was spending the evening at his parents' house with a friend. The two were alone when Jeff's friend noticed something unusual. A figure peeking in through the front door window. At first, Jeff didn't believe his friend, thinking it was just a joke, but when he looked outside, he saw it too. Something large, black and staring right at them. "It looked like a coconut," Jeff recalled, though it was too dark to make out more details. Freaked out, the boys ran to Jeff's mother's bedroom and grabbed a .22 rifle. Jeff told his friend to lock the door, but he was too scared to move. Instead, they rushed into the bedroom, which didn't have curtains at the time. That's when they heard it, heavy breathing and scratching at the window. Looking up, they saw a large, hairy hand pressed against the screen. Whatever was outside had to be 8 to 10 feet tall to be looking in like that. The boys panicked. Jeff's friend fired 2 shots at the figure, but both missed. The creature ran off into the night, leaving the boys terrified. When the sheriff arrived, he found the bullet holes in the window, but no signs of blood or footprints on the hard adobe ground. Skeptical, he asked if the boys had been drinking, but both Jeff and his friend were clean-cut, aspiring wrestlers. Jeff's brother later confirmed that when their parents returned home, the boys were visibly shaken, and the impression of a large hand could still be seen on the window screen. Jeff later recounted another strange event in the same area, although he couldn't recall the exact date. One night, he and the same friend were walking into town when they saw a dark figure in the road ahead. At first, they thought it was a cow, but as they got closer, they realized it was standing upright, about 8 to 10 feet tall. The 2 boys immediately turned and ran home, unsure of what they had seen, but certain they didn't want to find out if it was following them. These encounters left a lasting impression on Jeff, who never forgot the eerie details of those nights. Late one evening in the fall of 1982, in the rural outskirts of Pinedale, Wyoming, a chilling encounter left a lasting impression on a lone driver. John, a local ranch hand, was returning home after a long day of work. It was around midnight, and the winding dirt road was enveloped in darkness, save for the narrow beams of his truck's headlights cutting through the night. As he navigated the familiar path, John noticed something unusual. At first, he thought it was just a shadow cast by the trees, but as he drew closer, it became clear that this was no ordinary shadow. Standing in the middle of the road was a tall, dark figure. It appeared to be covered in thick fur, and its eyes glowed with an eerie luminescence reflecting the headlights. John's heart raced as he slowed the truck to a crawl, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The figure stood motionless, staring directly at him. He felt a chill run down his spine. Despite the fear gnawing at him, John couldn't look away. The creature's presence was both intimidating and mesmerizing. Summoning all his courage, John decided to inch the truck forward, hoping the figure would move aside. To his horror, the creature began to walk towards him, its massive frame swaying with each step. Panic set in, and John instinctively reached for the shotgun he kept under the seat. But as he fumbled with the weapon, the creature suddenly stopped, let out a deep guttural growl, and then, with incredible speed, darted into the dense forest lining the road. Shaken, John sped home, constantly checking his rearview mirror, half expecting the creature to reappear. When he finally reached his house, he bolted the doors and windows, unable to shake the image of those glowing eyes from his mind. The next day, John returned to the spot with a few friends, hoping to find some evidence of the encounter. They searched the area thoroughly but found no footprints, no broken branches, nothing to suggest that anything out of the ordinary had happened. John's friends were skeptical, but the fear in his eyes told them he had experienced something truly terrifying. To this day, John rarely speaks of that night, but the memory of the creature's glowing eyes and the chilling growl haunt him still. Was it a wild animal, a prank, or something beyond explanation? John may never know, but one thing is certain: the encounter left an indelible mark on his life. Sighting summary. The year was 1982. Season was fall. Location was Pinedale, Wyoming. Nearest road was a rural dirt road outside of town. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the spine-chilling world of Bigfoot encounters. If you enjoyed this video and want to dive deeper into more eerie tales and mysterious creatures, don't forget to support the channel by liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications for future uploads. And if you've had your own strange experiences or sightings, I'd love to hear about them. Drop them in the comments below. Stay tuned and keep your eyes on the forest. There's always more to discover.